Hello and welcome to the third in our series of 13 webinars being offered during Career Month. My name is Adam Sylvain and I work with the Alumni Career Development Team here at the University of Chicago in Hyde Park. I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar entitled Building an Effective Startup Team. Today we will hear from Booth alumna Sophia Matveeva, CEO and co-founder of Enty, an innovative fashion tech platform where women can access the professional advice of stylists and the opinions of an engaged style-conscious community in a safe, troll-free environment. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to cede the floor to Sophia.
Hi, hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so excited to be here. I'm very proud to be part of this program. So we're going to be talking about startup teams, and I hope you guys know who these guys are just here. It's the Silicon Valley crew, slightly dysfunctional, but really enthusiastic. So I think actually that those two adjectives are pretty good examples of what a good startup team is. So first of all, I want to tell you who am I and why am I here? So actually, I went to the University of Chicago twice for my sins. I was at the college where fun comes to die, and then I came back for more, and I got my MBA from Chicago Booth. It was when I was doing my MBA at Chicago Booth in Waverly Deutsch's entrepreneurship class. I started working on the idea that is now Enty. So just very quickly, Enty is a platform where women discuss what to wear and buy. As Adam said, our first and main product is an iPhone app where you can take a photo and ask a question like, should I wear this tonight or should I wear these shoes with this dress? And you'll get feedback from professional stylists. We've now got users around the world, but mainly in the UK, in the US, and in Canada. And we're growing. I've also been writing about our startup journey in Forbes, so you can read about some of those trials and tribulations there. And the reason why I'm doing this is I'm a first-time founder. So I have made lots and lots of mistakes, and I think I'll carry on making them. I think some of the most painful mistakes have been to do with the team because human relationships are just they're difficult to navigate. You know, you can go to business school and you can learn how to run a business. You can learn how to analyze financials, but dealing with people, that's really hard. And I don't think really business school, any other school teaches you, prepares you properly for that. So hopefully some of the insights and some of the mistakes that I've made that I'm going to share with you, you will mean that you avoid them. But first of all, I want to find out a little bit about you. So Adam, could we do the first poll to find out who our lovely attendees are?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, so we had 83% voted, and I can share that 15% say that they work in a startup, 26% are startup founders, 53% are interested in launching a startup, and 6% are startup investors.
Okay, so 53% you are interested in walking down this perilous road. Yeah, good luck. It's fun, it's hard work. So the first thing that you need to know about startups, especially for that 53 or 56% for you, I'm assuming that a lot of you are in the corporate world, and you really have to make a very strong separation between rules that apply in the corporate world and rules that apply in the startup world. In my view, they are completely different, and this couldn't be more pronounced than in hiring and in the work that you do. So if you switch off completely, you fall asleep, or you have to go, just remember this is the key point. If you're going from a corporate, don't apply the same metrics to a startup, either during the interview process or when you join. And equally, if you're recruiting somebody and you're in a startup, don't think just because they've had a really impressive corporate career that they're going to do great things for you. In my experience, that just hasn't worked out. Also, in my experience, the people that have really worked out well um, probably would have had a bit of a difficult time in a corporate. I think it's two different kinds of personality types. Um, and maybe people can evolve, but just don't look at a resume that looks, don't look at something that's really good on paper and then decide that that person is going to scale your startup and make you and turn you into a billionaire. So the first thing that I've learned is with startups, you've got to play the long game, which is actually really difficult because in a startup, you are by definition fighting for survival. So you've got to think about this vision that you're building. You've got to inspire people with this amazing vision that you have, and that the thing that you're doing is going to be globally dominant and used by everybody, and that your name will be up in lights. You've got to believe that. Otherwise, what's the point? But you're also looking at what's happening in your company that day, and you're looking that your bank balance is probably going down. You've got a bunch of problems, most of which you don't quite know how to solve, and it's really difficult to think even medium term on some really stressful days. But you've got to manage that stress, and you've got to play the long game. And I think that applies especially in two main areas, and those are the areas that have the highest opportunity cost. So basically, that is money and people's jobs. So let's talk about money first, because many of you probably have thought about fundraising or investing. So you might have heard the phrase that you should always be fundraising. Startups are always fundraising. Why is that true? That's true because the more money you raise, the faster you can grow, the more experiments you can do, the more things you can see that don't work out, and so you can learn very quickly and you can grow faster. So frankly, as a startup founder, anytime that I go to an event and I see somebody who is a high net worth individual from a family office or from a VC or even from a larger institutional investor, I talk to them, I get their card, I make sure that they know who I am, I put them on our updates, I make sure that that person, unless they explicitly ask me to leave them alone, I want to make sure that I kind of stay in touch with them. A really practical example is if you're raising one round, you've got to be in pretty close proximity to investors for the next round. Because what you're doing for those rounds is you're saying, okay, we need X amount of money to achieve this particular target. You need to know that once you reach that particular target, the next set of investors are going to be ready to invest in you. You only know that if you speak to the next set of investors. So if you're raising a seed round, talk to the Series A guys. So if you're talking to angel investors, make sure you're talking to the VCs, even if you're too early for them, to just find out what they need. It's exactly the same when it comes to hiring. So, for example, your first hire might be, let's say your first hire is a back-end engineer. The back end is typically, in a tech company, that's what you're going to be starting to work on first before you have the front end. It's going to be the harder and more expensive task, and it's gonna take longer. So that's your first hire. But once the back end is functioning quite well, you need a front end. And what you don't want to get to is the back end is ready, but you don't have anything unless you have the front end. And then you're thinking, oh my God, crap, I've got to find this front end person out of nowhere. And while you're looking for the front end person, you still got to pay the back end guy. which is why even if you don't need somebody immediately, have exactly the same approach as I just described to investors, to potential team members. So I do the same thing. So when I meet people who I know are going to be relevant to growing our company, even if it is in about a year's time, I make sure that I have lunch with them, I get to know them, I try to understand what their interests are, and whether they're happy in the career path that they have. Because generally, if they're a good and interesting person, then they're going to have a few options and a few demands on their time. But another thing that I think is really, which I mean, a mistake that I've made, and I've seen my friends who are founders also make, is essentially what we do is this: we kind of go up to a person that we find really impressive, and we say the equivalent of, "I think you're great. Do you want to run away with me to this amazing place where you're going to be really happy and then you'll make loads of money?" And then this person looks at me and thinks, "Oh, you're just crazy." Um, the reason why hiring somebody as a startup comes across as this "let's run away with me to the sunset and you don't know me at all and it looks crazy," the reason why it's like that is I don't yet have the brand of Google or the brand of Facebook. So they have absolutely no familiarity with me, and they don't know if I'm crazy. They haven't got to know me. But what I am asking them to do is to put their livelihood in my hands. So essentially, I'm saying to them, don't worry, I will pay your rent. Don't worry, I will make sure that you have food on the table. But if they don't know me, if you don't know somebody, would you trust somebody to take care of such an important thing for you? I'm sure a lot of us still have student loans on this webinar. Would you trust a random person to just tell you that they will take care of you? No. And it is very natural for candidates to be really wary of startup founders and their promises, because there are a lot of promises, there's a lot of vision, but there's no straightforward financial reporting. Nobody really knows what's going on in the company, and so they distrust you. And for the people who are interested in working in a startup, you really shouldn't just trust a startup founder that you should run away to the sunset with them and that you'll make lots of money, because it's not necessarily going to be true. And because startups are by their nature so opaque, you might end up getting yourself into trouble. So for the startup founders, be aware that you have to gain this person's trust in order for them to make a really, really big life decision. And often it's not just a life decision for them, it's a life decision for their family. So if they're younger, they're going to be running that decision by their parents. So their parents have to be convinced that you're not a crazy person. If they are, not straight out of college, they might have a partner, girlfriend, a boyfriend, or they might be married. So then that partner needs to be convinced that you're not a crazy person. That partner might need to be convinced that they are okay handling the financial risk of your potential highest investment decision, which is not something that a corporate would really have to do. So this is why, if you see somebody that you want to hire, build a relationship with them and build a relationship with their family, build a relationship with people that matter to them, because that person is going to be consulting people and trying to work out whether you're trustworthy and whether they should tie their fate with yours. So wherever there is big opportunity cost is where you really need to be careful. So this is a high stake, personally very amusing to me. Anyway, the stakes here are really high because when it works, it's amazing. But when it doesn't, it can mean the death of your company. So there's an example of things working that I really like. I'm assuming you guys have heard of a company called Skype. Some of you may have heard of a company called TransferWise. If you haven't, it's really good for international exchange. So what's the link? The first ever employee of Skype is a gentleman called Tavid Hinrichs. He was not a co-founder, but he was the first employee. He is now the founder of TransferWise and is a very, very successful guy. I've actually heard a VC that invested in Skype say that Skype would have been nothing without Tavid. I don't know the Skype story intimately enough to tell you whether that's true or not, but being the first employee in a company that has gone that far and to stay there right until after exit, and then to found another unicorn, this guy's pretty special. So what I'm saying here, that clearly the Skype founders were wise, but also they were very lucky that they found this brilliant first employee who helped them build this business, which was a great adventure for them all and made them all extremely rich. So that's an example that's easy to find out about because it's really easy to read about successes. It's not easy to read about failures because journalists don't cover failed startups. I mean, journalists will cover Tesla if it fails, but that's really far from a startup. A small company, nobody's going to know if something goes wrong. So the way you've got to think about it is in a startup, you really can't hide. If you're not doing the job, if you have a bad attitude, or if you just can't do the job, or you can't be bothered to do the job, people are going to notice. So I have, in our company, we are 11 people. So yeah, that means of course you can have a bad day. Everybody has a bad day, and everybody has a tired day when they're less productive than they normally are. That's okay. And everybody gets into a bad mood. We're just human. But nobody is unproductive or in a bad mood consistently because that just wouldn't work. Bad attitude and bad productivity are contagious. And that really matters in a startup because if that one person contaminates another person, that's basically going to be 20% of my workforce gone. Then it could be 30%. Then it could spread. And then if you're losing 40% of your workforce to this contagion, then you're really, really screwed. So one person can actually spread the rot. So you've got to be really, really careful. Also, you've got to think about who the behavior that you're setting. Startups generally have quite a lot of young people who haven't yet who are not set in their ways in the workplace. So if they're being shown a bad example, and that person who's setting a bad example, either with their attitude or with their work quality, if they're allowed to get away with it, then the younger people are likely to think, oh, this is just how you work. This is what working is like, and you just can't have that. So if you get it right, it's amazing. If you get it wrong, it could actually mean the death of your company. So this is a really scary, important task and something I think about probably more than anything else, actually. So you have to remember, that we're in the startup world, not in the corporate world. So if you had a choice of experience or this excited baby, always pick the excited baby. So I'll give you a live example that we went through fairly recently, which I found really quite difficult. So we have been looking for a digital marketer for our company. We're growing, but we need to hire more to grow. So we've been in conversation with a person who is pretty senior at one of the big tech companies, at one of the FANGs. And I really admire this person. I think this person has really great insight. And this person was kind of making movements towards joining us. And I was so excited. I thought I'd really won a prize. And then when it came to, okay, so this is the package. What are you going to do next? Like, let's now talk about the actual transition. Then all of a sudden, I started hearing conditions which just didn't make sense and needs that I didn't expect. And kind of, and then I started seeing an attitude of, well, you tiny little startup, you're so lucky to get me from this really big tech company. And, when I come, I expect you to kind of dance around me to make sure that I'm really comfortable. And also, all of a sudden, the salary this person was asking was far higher than anything we'd originally agreed. And the more we talked, the more I realized that even if we could afford this salary, but to be honest, we would rather hire another person with that extra several £1,000s that this person needed. But the more I talked to this person, the more I realized that actually their attitude was really, really the wrong attitude. It was a I am great, I have experience, I know everything, and you little startup people, you don't know anything, and you're so lucky to get me. And I do think that we would have been lucky to get this person. But what we've done is also something remarkable. Yes, it's impressive to work in a big tech company, but I think it's really impressive to build a company from the ground up that people work in, that people fund, and where customers are willing to spend their money. I think that's, to be honest, I think that's far more impressive than being a corporate employee. But obviously, I'm biased. But you often get this kind of people. You often have people who have really, really great experience, but they have the wrong attitude. So as we were going through this situation, I then realized that actually what we need, a better employee is not going to be somebody who is going to be expensive and think very highly of themselves from one of the big tech firms, but actually a young digital marketer who probably has absolutely no experience, but has all the enthusiasm and frankly wants to learn. We most things that we're doing can be taught. We are not reinventing the wheel, and yes, I work with very, very smart people, but none of us are godlike. This is not the divine here. If you have enthusiasm and you have a good brain, you actually don't need to know what tools to use. You can learn them. Especially tech companies and technology and digital marketing tools, they're changing so fast that actually the specific skills that you have are far less relevant than your can-do attitude, because you'll just have to learn things on the spot. I'm doing things that I've never done before every single day, and so is everybody else on the team. So it's much more important to be able to do things, to want to do things than to be able to do them. So when you're looking for people, this is another mistake I made. This is let's have a look at this resume, and then I'll tell you what actually happened with this person. This person was an advisor to all new and prospective clients in a large region. They were accountable for new business sales across multiple sales executives and channels. They identify and develop new products based on market demand and work across the organization to enable the revenue growth of Company X. So when I saw this, I got really excited because we needed to sell things. So this person first told me that they're going to help me raise some financing, which is selling equity. And to me, this resume looks like an amazing sales resume. And then we actually have a B2B product. We sell trend insight data to retailers and brands and consultancies. And then I thought this person said that they'll be able to sell our B2B product. I got really excited. I thought, brilliant! I don't need to go around and do all this sales stuff anymore. I can do something else because I've got this genius salesperson. So we started working. This person was kind of consulting us part-time and delivered absolutely no result. I mean, zero, nothing. But they took up a lot of my time. We had a lot of strategy sessions and discussions and meetings and talking about trends. And I was thinking, well, maybe this is what they need. Maybe I need to enable this person to tell them all of the stuff, and we need to create all of these slides and strategies and plans, and then the money will roll in. And that didn't happen. So And then we ended up having to part ways, which was always really unpleasant. And I can't blame this person for being stupid, because they're not stupid. They actually have a good career in a big corporate, and they get paid a large salary. So clearly they are doing something right. They just couldn't do it for our startup. And then I was thinking, how did I get myself into this mess? What did I do wrong? What what should I not do again? Because we will still need to fill this position. So what do I do? And I realized that the mistake that I made is I was asking the wrong questions. I'd worked in corporates before, and I was talking to somebody who's in a big corporate. So I kind of did a corporate interview. And then they told me things like this resume, how they sold all of these products, and they got new clients, and they increased revenue. What I failed to do was to say, what did they actually do? What did they do when they get to work in the morning and they get to their desk? What do they do? Because the problem that I got is that I got a manager. I got somebody who had a very large team, with a really large budget, and they would sort of direct where people need to go and what needs to be done, and then there would be results. Um, and they actually hadn't done anything by themselves for a really, really long time, and so they didn't know how to do it, and they just weren't used to the kind of pressure of a startup where you can't have a bad quarter, because a bad quarter for us, that's going to be death. So I realized since then, actually, I've improved. And now what I do is I ask a really granular question. So when somebody says, I scaled revenue and launched new products, then I say, well, what did you do? Did you come up with the idea for the product? How did you come up with the idea for the product? Who did you work with? Who developed the product? How involved were you? If they say I was very involved, you say, what did you actually do? And from that, you can see how much they delegated, what they were involved in, what their talents are. At that point, also, I would suggest look for any expensive solutions that this person used. For example, if they say, well, we had this problem and then we hired McKinsey to give us some strategy advice, then, well, with your startup money, you're not going to be hiring McKinsey. So if the way they solve problems is through something really expensive, then they're not for you. So really get into the granular aspect. Ask them what they actually did and who they worked with. Now, this bit for me, honestly, has been really, really hard. Your startup doesn't need another you. We all talk about diversity and how it's really important. Now, here, what I'm talking about is diversity of thinking and of personalities. Because if you hire somebody who looks radically different to you but thinks exactly like you do, then that's not diversity. You need a different personality and a different way of addressing problems. This I find is the hardest bit, because we want to hire people that we like. And we like people who are like us. So people that you can share a joke with and have a laugh with. And if you're extroverted, you probably want to have somebody who's extroverted. And if you're introverted, you probably don't want somebody who's going to be rabbiting on. So you have to do something which is against what you actually gravitate towards. And I find that really difficult. So remind yourself that you're not looking for new friends. You are looking for people to do a good job. Now, again, a live example from myself. My co-founder, my technical co-founder is, really your typical CTO, really introverted, pretty monosyllabic, doesn't talk about feelings, doesn't talk much at all. And if something annoys him, then he just doesn't answer and just sort of kind of retreats into his own hole. I don't know if you can tell, but that's completely the opposite of me. If something annoys me, I will tell you about it at great length. We will have to discuss it for a very long time, and then we'll probably forget about it. Um, I like talking a lot. I like laughing a lot. I like being around people. So what our startup doesn't need is another me, because we'll sit there, we'll talk, we'll have lots of fun, but who's going to write the code? Who's going to analyze the data? That's not really going to be me. It's very lucky that I think me and my co-founder, despite these differences in personalities, that we stayed together. I think that's luck, it's determination. I still ask him what were you thinking then? Because obviously he didn't say anything. We've now become very close. Now the company is about 2 years old, but it took us more than a year to kind of get into the groove of things where we understand each other. I now know not to talk to him the way I would talk to my friends, because that doesn't work with him. And I think he's also moved towards dealing with me more. And now when we have a kind of one of our usual misunderstandings, because we're just such different people, we now know to laugh about it rather than be offended, which frankly happened before. But it took us a really long time to get there. So I'm also glad because he is there to hire people who are more like him. So the introverts, the quiet people, the quiet analysts. And I'm there to hire people who are more like me, who tend to be on the marketing and sales and events and the fun side of things. Well, that's fun for me. But before you have that person who can see a different personality trait, you've got to really push yourself hard. And when you do hire that person and you're finding it difficult to speak to them and you're finding it difficult to understand them, unless they're doing something wrong and unless they are poisoning the team with their bad attitude, just stick with it, because we are different people. We're wired differently. Your team has to have diversity of thinking in it, which means that you are going to find it difficult to talk to people who are not like you. But unless they're doing something wrong, stick with it and it should be rewarding. Oh, no, wrong slide. So, Adam, um, before I start offending people, I wanted to ask you to do the next poll.
Absolutely. And this was the industry question, correct?
Yep.
All right, we're almost all recorded, and I will share out these responses so you'll all be able to view them in just a moment.
Thank you. Oh, interesting. Okay, 15%. Well, I'm really sorry to the 15% of you about the next slide, but it's true. So, this is not pointless banker bashing. I worked in private equity, so I can say this. So, yeah, I mean, I worked in private equity and I have a Chicago Booth MBA. So, what I'm saying here is like, I'm probably going to be killed by some of my classmates. That's a risk I'm willing to take. Now, there is a reason why I'm saying this. Startups really need operational help. And startups are in fashion now. Entrepreneurship is a cool thing. Look at all of you busy, smart people who signed up to this webinar. That means that while finance and investment banking used to be the super cool profession a few years ago, that's where everybody wanted to go from business school. Entrepreneurship is now the most popular concentration of Chicago Booth MBAs. That means that, in my experience, I've seen quite a few people who are interested in going and transitioning from finance to entrepreneurship. Some of them want to set up their own companies, which is, good luck to you. But then there are people who want to go into a startup. I mean, I think going into startup is really awesome and it's working out for me much more than private equity ever did. But you've got to you've got to have some useful skills. And frankly, being an investment banker is not going to help me in what I'm doing at all. Um, this is what I'm saying. No one cares about your strategic advice. So far, I've had two people, one a Wall Street analyst and another one a Citi analyst, proposing to be my CFO. I had another person, much younger person, so she is an investment banking analyst, offering to come and do financial analysis at Enty. I mean, I can analyze our finances on the back of a napkin because it's a startup. It's really pretty easy. Um, we're not hedging currencies over here. So if you want to move over from finance into a startup, then do something actually useful to a startup and get some operations experience. So that means do some stuff on the side where that a startup is going to need. So what do startups need? Funding. You're always fundraising. Customers. So our customers are going to be different from another startup's customers, but you're trying to get somebody to give you their money. So sales, product or engineering. So if you're the kind of person who works in finance and has a really good understanding of code, then you could contribute. And dogs' bodies. That's actually really important, and I really don't want that bit to kind of be disrespected or disliked. If you can't help the startup with any of the above three things, number four is super important. So we constantly need people to just help us out on the events that we do, to look over presentations, to just to help us work, to help us prepare for a meeting, to help us even carry things, to help us organize things. And yes, it doesn't sound particularly glamorous, but that is really, really super useful to help us organize trips, to look for conferences, things like that. And if you're a smart person who's well educated, but you just don't have the relevant experience and you can't help with the top three things, which actually a lot of people, especially from financial services, can't, then actually just saying, look, I will give you 4 hours per week, or however many hours that you can, just tell me where you need me. You'll learn a lot. It will make the startup like you. So if you're thinking of making that transition, just start getting some real operations experience in some kind of startup environment, and you're far more likely to make that transition. For the 26% of you who are managing startups, if you're in that position as well and you're being approached by all these smart investment bankers with no real operations experience, see what they've actually done. Are they doing stuff on the side that means that they're growing something? Like, do they have some kind of website that's growing in audience? Are they selling something? Have they been involved in a startup where they have helped them fundraise, for example? So if it's just they helped with strategy, strategy at a startup, that's not a full-time job. Strategy at a corporate is a full-time job, not at a startup. So another person that you need to be aware of is this particular hero from 30 Rock. This is a problem that also I've come across, and now I know how to politely deal with this. Again, startups are fashionable, and it's really, really popular amongst pretty senior corporate executives to be an advisor or a mentor to a startup. I mean, that's great if they can actually deliver something useful. So if they are a senior executive in a company in the sector where your startup operates, that's useful because they can talk to you about some industry trends, they can make some relevant introductions. But if they are not, then really it's going to be completely useless. The problems that I've come across is what I've just mentioned, is people who think that strategy is a job. Strategy is a full-time job at a startup. those people also tend to waste your time with conversations that are not going to get you anywhere. I remember about a year ago, a pretty senior executive at a company wanted to have breakfast with me to discuss our strategy for China. At the time, we had absolutely no strategy for China. But really, what he wanted to talk about was what do I think about tech trends in China? I mean, at the time, I had absolutely no idea. And I think he just thought, well, this is going to be an interesting discussion. Let's just have breakfast and have a chat about it. For me, I was thinking, I have things to do. I can't just sit here and wax lyrical about this nonsense. Because blue skies thinking, we have to do that, but we kind of know where we're going. We need to work out how we're going to survive the next 3 to 6 months. Another problem that I've had is with people who are these senior executives, they come up with an idea. I say the idea is fantastic, and then they try to delegate it. But who are they going to delegate it to? We don't have the people to delegate it to. Everybody is already really, really stretched. People are working as much as possible. So in general, I've learned to say that, okay, if you think it's a good idea, this is a very tiny budget with which you can execute it, go ahead. In general, in my experience, when I've said that, nothing has actually happened. So, thinking and doing tend to be different things. And they do get annoyed when you have to get what they actually have to do things that usually their secretary would do for them. So if this is you and you want to make the transition, do the same things that I said for the bankers. Get involved in some real operations experience with a startup. Show that you actually are not afraid of doing some junior work and frankly some manual labor, because this is what startups are all about. So how do you actually find the people that you do want to get? This is a diamond in the rough, and that's really what you're looking for. I'll give you the first examples from me. Another one is from a friend's startup. Our first employee I found on Instagram. So, excuse me. I put out an Instagram post saying that we were looking for an intern, and then I did a bunch of relevant hashtags. And then I checked out every single profile of the people who liked this post. One of them looked really interesting. I wrote to that person and I asked them to become an intern. That person was an intern with us for about 4 months, and then she went full time. So this is kind of self-selective, because the kind of person who's sitting around on social media and liking and following social media posts about startup jobs, that's the kind of person that you're going to be more interested in. You can't do things like go to graduate recruitment fairs, because you can't compete on the same field as the Googles and the Facebooks of this world. This is why, on to my second point, this is something that somebody I know did very well. Make your company stand for something. So make sure that your company is known for a particular mission. If you have a particular mission and that mission is known in the press and on social media, then people will write to you and they will offer their help and their time. So I know the founder of Her, which is a queer women's dating app, and they really stand for something. They stand for women's rights. They stand for queer rights. They really have a very specific message. And that message really resonates with a particular audience who's really passionate about it. So because that company is really known for it, people write to her asking how they can help, how they contribute, and whether they can join the company. If you have a mission that people believe in, that's far stronger than just offering them money. Lastly, look for, when you're going to events and you're recruiting people, look for organizers and doers at events, not just the attendees. So if you're going to a startup event, talk to the people who created it rather than to just the people who turned up. Now, my final point is you've got to date before getting married. This is what I was telling you about the young lady who I found on Instagram. She was our intern for 4 months, and then she went full time, and it's I got really really super lucky with her. I think it's a really stupid decision of somebody who's never worked in a startup to go straight into a startup, and for the startup founder to hire somebody straight away without having had any experience with them. So what I would suggest, when you find somebody that you're interested in hiring, work with them on some kind of project. That's a really good option for both of you, because that means that person can still carry on studying, they can still stay in their corporate job, and for you, while they're doing this, you can actually show them the stuff that you're really nervous about them reacting negatively to. If they don't react negatively to rolling their sleeves up, if they don't think that strategy is going to be a full-time job, and if they have the right attitude, then make them the offer, but make them the offer after they've already done a project and after they've worked with you for about a quarter. So at that point, I would love to know what your questions are. So Adam, shall I hand it over to you?
Yes, absolutely. So happy to moderate a few questions here. The first, have somebody who's identified as a career transitioner and is wondering if
Oh,
there is
interesting.
any age bias involved with the hiring for folks who want to be involved in a startup, and if so, maybe how to overcome that.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you honestly, I would prefer to work with people who had a bit more maturity than your average 22-year-old, honestly, because this is a really hard, this is a very hard emotional journey for a founder. So if you had somebody who actually had life experience on your side, I mean, I think that would be really, really helpful. But older people are more expensive in general. They have higher expectations of, because generally they have more responsibility, and that's difficult. Um, so are you willing to do free work, or are you willing to be priced at the same bracket as a 22-year-old? That's something that only you can decide. Um, Being paid a high salary at a proper early stage startup is frankly not going to happen, which means that there is a bias. If you're happy to have a good options package and a small base, um, then I think a lot of those problems are going to be solved. And another thing is proving that you are not far above rolling your sleeves up and doing some dog's body work. And the only way you can do that is, I think, by proving that you've done it somewhere else before. So maybe do something on the side, maybe help out a startup. And so when you're interviewing a startup full time, you can actually say, yes, I stood at an event and I took registrations, because I still have to do that. And we have a team of people, but we held an event for our stylists just last week, and we literally had everybody doing, frankly, manual labor for about an hour to set it up. I was the one carrying the bags from the supermarket and pouring out all the drinks. So if you can get involved like that, and all startups need an equivalent of that, then I think you're going to be in a pretty good stead. I hope that answers your question, but if not, just email me and we can have this chat.
Great, thanks. Next question. You mentioned how you found an intern, I think through Instagram and a social post. Somebody was interested specifically in how you found your co-founder, and any advice in identifying that person.
That's super hard. So yeah, that was not a fun journey. In general, for business people, it is hard because business people have ideas, um, but we need somebody who understands technology. And since everybody wants somebody who understands technology, there's a there's a competition for them. So the first person that I convinced to join this road with me, she was at Chicago booth with me, and she used to work at Groupon. She she is not a technical person, but she started working with me on this. It was a classroom project, and we just thought, let's see where this goes. We then realized that we needed a CTO, and we basically started asking our connections, and it really wasn't getting anywhere. So then she messaged her former colleague, who was the CTO of Groupon in Russia. And he was the CTO of Groupon in Russia by the age of 23. So really smart guy. And he was, well, so basically that's the person now. That's the introvert I was telling you about. It, I mean, that's luck. That's it's luck that we got together and that things worked out. Um, but also it's personal connections. I've never really heard of things working out well when people do this kind of co-founder dating stuff and like just randomly find people online because I think building trust takes a really long time. And if you are introduced to somebody directly, then you already overcome a few barriers. So what I would do if you're looking for a co-founder is I'd start making friends with people who work in companies with a big tech aspect, either tech companies or companies that have a really big digital bit to them. Start getting to know them and get introduced to their colleagues. I mean that it worked for me, and I've seen that kind of thing work for a few other people. If you're technically minded, then there are a few accelerators that you can do where you actually can find a business person to work with you. But in general, business person finding a technical co-founder is more difficult than a technical co-founder finding a business person.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for one more question. So this one's about a particular recruiting platform, and this attendee asks, have you used Angie's List, or is it, sorry, Angel List,
Angel,
Angel
angel
List
list.
for
So
recruiting, and how does that work?
So it's really big in the US, and I know people have used it. It's really not that much of a big deal in the UK, and I mean, as you can hear, I'm based in London, so it's not really a platform that I would use because it's not that relevant where I am. But what I have used it for is to research salaries in the US, to just see what somebody would cost. If you're looking for the UK, look at Glassdoor. It's kind of it's it does a pretty good job, but from what I understand in the US, Angels List is a really good one. But just be aware where you're posting the jobs because if you're posting a job in Silicon Valley, then you're really competing with some tough people. For engineering as well, if you're looking for engineers, check out TopTal. They generally have some pretty good people, and that's a global platform. That's TopTal, like top talent. One more? Or no? Would you
Yeah, I
like
think we do. Yeah, we can do one more. Let's do
to
it.
do one?
Yeah, final question. I think you touched on this a bit. Would you recommend somebody join a startup before organizing their own?
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. So I missed this bit actually. I joined somebody else's startup before I did my own, and it was a learning experience. You know how bad experiences are the ones that teach you the most. It was kind of like that. So startups are by their nature opaque. So you might join somewhere amazing, and you're all going to become millionaires, and your boss will become your best friend. Awesome. More likely, that's not going to happen. But that's okay because you can also learn from that experience. So the I had my corporate career. Then when I was doing my MBA, I actually worked in a startup at the same time. And from that startup, I mean, I got some of the ideas, some of the business ideas that we use, but also I learned a lot about what not to do, and how not to approach hiring. So the startup that I worked in, the founder had hired his girlfriend as his number two, which I think everybody else found really annoying. But to me, there are some friends of mine who I think are really awesome and who I'd love to work with. I'm really hesitant about hiring them now because I saw somebody who hired their friends, hired their girlfriend, and how much resentment there was. So yeah, I learned lots from that experience. So if you can, do that first. Also, it helps you fundraise because investors are wary of people who've gone from a corporate to just founding a startup, because startups are so much more chaotic and so much more difficult. And as I said, there's nobody to delegate to. You're the person who's pouring the drinks at your own event when you're supposed to be the CEO and all of this stuff. So a lot of people like the idea of startups because they like the kind of supposed glamour of it. But when it comes to it and they see that it's not glamorous, it's really gritty, they quit. So it's better that you have a track record of having been involved with startups and seen what it's actually like before you try to convince people to give you money to build your own. I hope this helps, guys. I know we have to end. I'd love to answer more questions. So you can find me on Twitter, um, and that's at Sophia Matveeva. So you see my last name here is just at that, you'll see. And just write to me, and I will be sure to answer your questions. Thank you
Terrific.
very
Well,
much. I hope this was useful.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Sophia, and thank you to everyone for participating. We hope that you can join us again next week for more programming to help build your career. We do have a month of programming here in November. On Monday, November 5th, we'll be hosting a webinar titled Job Search Success in Your 40s, 50s, and Beyond. And you'll be given tools to learn how to leverage your strengths and drive your career success beyond middle age. And you can visit our events page at careers.uchicagoalumni.org to view our full lineup of Career Month events happening throughout the month of November. We hope you'll join us again soon. Take care and have a good rest of your day.
Bye.